What's happening, everybody? On today's show, Kalen DeBoer is officially introduced as new Alabama head coach. Who will join his staff? What Alabama players are jumping ship? Also, a key Alabama assistant is headed to Georgia. We got contract news on other coaches. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 or more infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's J-A-S-E medical.com. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, we got plenty to jump into, so we got to start first with University of Alabama making it official over the weekend as they have officially hired their new guy, Kalen DeBoer, coming over from Washington. He met with reporters on Saturday afternoon for his introductory press conference and hit on a number of topics. Part of his opening statement, he talked about reasons for leaving Washington. He said, people have asked, why would you go to Alabama? Well, when it comes to tradition and the history of the program, it's second to none. When I look at places I want to be, it's about winning championships, and that's an expectation that I cannot wait and accept as a privilege to try to uphold winning SEC titles and winning national championships. And when you have resources like we have here at Alabama, that makes it easier. DeBoer leaves Washington, of course, where he went 25-2 over the past 2 seasons, won a Pac-12 title, and got to the national championship, just coming up short, losing to Michigan. DeBoer was asked how much Nick Sabin will be allowed to be around the program. He said 100% access to everything. I would be a fool if that wasn't the case. I'm going to ask him that he shows up and gives me at least one thing every day. There was already reports that Sabin will keep an office at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Not his old office, but have room to work there. During his introduction, DeBoer admitted there's a threat to losing players. He said it's real strong. Said that in opportunities like this, some of your competitors look to come and hurt you while you're going through transition. DeBoer did urge the current roster to, quote, give me a chance. More on Alabama transfer portal news here in just a second. But DeBoer had a message for those who question whether he could recruit well in this part of the country. He said, well, look, I wasn't a West Coast guy either. Never been to the West Coast until a few years ago. Coached at 2 schools out there. I think there's an ability to adapt that I feel confident in to where we're at. I understand what the SEC is all about, kind of how strong and how much it means here. Already a 5-star wideout in the class of 2024 a couple days ago. Roydell Williams decommitted from Alabama, and the latest crystal balls have him going to Auburn, which, of course, would be a big flipperoo there in that Iron Bowl rivalry. More notes on DeBoer. He was asked on how he will go about building his first coaching staff. He said there will be a touch of Washington in there, but I understand there needs to be some SEC ties. So one important piece of his staff coming over from Washington, well, he came over on the flight on Saturday with Courtney Morgan, who served in a general manager role at Washington and previously did the same for Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. So seems like Courtney Morgan coming with him. Also, Jim McElwain's son, Jarrett McElwain. He is expected to join the staff. According to Football Scoop, McElwain is an Alabama alum, began his work in football personnel in his undergrad days in Tuscaloosa. 2022, he joined Washington staff with Kalen DeBoer. So Courtney Morgan and Jarrett McElwain coming over to Alabama. Get to some more staff changes here in just a second. But Nick Sabin was in attendance for the press conference on Saturday and sitting in the front row glaring at you with his legs folded. I mean, that's got to be quite the pressure, but Kalen DeBoer did a good job with Nick Sabin right there in the front row. Nick Sabin released a statement, said, I want nothing more than to see Alabama football continue to be successful, and Coach DeBoer is an outstanding choice to lead this program. He has a proven track record of success and is one of the brightest football minds. The biggest thing that stood out to me from DeBoer's press conference was he never said the words, this thing is going to take time. He never said the words of, It's going to be a transition phase. I mean, he gave all signs that we got to hit the ground running. And that's the expectations at Alabama, right? Like, they're not expecting, coach, you'll have a transition year. Like, it's big boy football. This is Alabama. This is the pinnacle of all. Like, you've got to come in and win from day one. Expectation for Bama fans are to, either win the SEC next year or at least make the playoff at minimum. Keep in mind, 10-2 next year in the SEC probably gets you in the playoff. So, but I like that about DeBoer. He didn't say any of that stuff. He could have. It's an easy cop out. Could have easily said that. We hear that from coaches all the time. This thing won't be built in a day. Well, Bama's already built. You got to go in and just maintain it. Washington OC Ryan Grubb was a candidate to be Alabama's offense coordinator just a year ago. Nick Sabin was very interested in hiring him. Well, Grubb posted a note late Saturday night telling Washington fans he did not get the head coaching job after Kalen DeBoer left. And on Sunday, it was confirmed that Grubb will not be the next head coach of the Huskies and it's expected to follow DeBoer to the Crimson Tide. So Ryan Grubb, the OC from Washington that Sabin wanted a year ago, he is coming to Bama, but he'll be under Kalen DeBoer. Other coaches expected to come over from Washington. Wide receivers coach Jamarcus Shepard, he is expected to come on over, as well as offensive line coach Scott Huff and tight ends coach Nick Sheridan. Washington's offense was number 2 in the country in passing offense this year. They were the number 12 offensive total offense. So obviously some good numbers there. But Bruce Feldman reporting Scott Huff, the O-line coach, coming over. They won the Joe Moore Award this year as the best O-line in the country. Huff was a longtime Washington assistant retained by DeBoer upon arriving. And Nick Sheridan reunited with DeBoer at Washington after previously working with him in Indiana. Now, Sheridan was a GA at Tennessee back from 2014 to 2016, so he brings some SEC experience with him. And then ESPN's Chris Lowe reported that DeBoer plans to retain a couple of Alabama assistants in Freddie Roach and Robert Gillespie. Roach, of course, an Alabama alum, joined Sabin's staff in 2020 as a D-line coach, and Gillespie has been the Tide's running back coach since 2021. Roach also coached at D-line at Ole Miss for several years and has worked numerous jobs for Alabama over the past decade. Gillespie, a ton of SEC experience as well. Played college ball at Florida, coached at South Carolina, Tennessee. So good to have a little SEC flavor there. Freddie Roach and Robert Gillespie, guys who've recruited in the South or in the SEC territory. Good to have them there, as well as Nick Sheridan coming over with them. Now let's touch on some of the Alabama departures. The Alabama Crimson Tide are set to lose one of their big-time tight ends, Amari Niblack, entering the transfer portal. He had 20 catches for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns this year. He was one of Alabama's top 3 pass catchers. Jermaine Burton, we know, already declared for the NFL draft. And Isaiah Bond had entered the portal a couple of days ago. It's already been announced he is transferring to Texas. Bond called his decision a business decision. And as for choosing Texas, Bond said he was drawn to the opportunity to go play with Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkeesian's system. Now, Sark is losing both Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell, so obviously some holes there. But Isaiah Bond going to play in the SEC next year, but he's going to be playing over at Texas. And we'll see where Amari Niblack ends up. Other guys, Alabama linebacker Sean Murphy, he has entered the transfer portal at Alabama. Guy that had a ton of offers coming out of high school. Alabama defensive back Antonio Kite, also entering the portal, played at Alabama for 2 years. Alabama defensive back Desmond Ricks has entered the portal. He was a 5-star recruit out of IMG. So a lot of people of interest there. How about Alabama running back Roydell Williams? We knew he had entered the portal. We now know he is going to Florida State. So Roydell Williams going to go be suiting up for FSU over there in the ACC. He was the number 2 rusher this year behind Jace McClellan, who announced he's heading to the NFL. Former Alabama tight end Miles Kitzelman, he spent 2 seasons with the Tide. He is heading to Tennessee, posted on his Instagram, Go Vols. So here's a list of the latest names, Alabama transfers so far. Now, some of these started before the Sabin announcement, so it's not all in reaction to Sabin retiring, but some have been post-retirement and some pre. And just to give you some of the biggest names on this list, Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack, Roydell Williams, Seth McLaughlin, of course, the center. He's already transferred to Ohio State, so he's going to be blocking for for the Ole Miss running back up there. You have an Alabama center blocking for Ole Miss running back Quinshon Judkins up at Ohio State. Ja'Cory Brooks, wide receiver, he transferred to Louisville. Of course, Eli Holstein, quarterback, hitting the portal. That was a big one as well. So a few other notes here. Alabama lost 2025 recruits on Sunday evening. 5-star wide receiver Jamie French reopened his commitment. He's the number 11 player in the class of 2025, the number 3 wide receiver in the country. And not only these guys leaving, but Bama players who declared for the draft. We had Terrion Arnold, Jermaine Burton, Dallas Turner, J.C. Latham, Chris Braswell, Justin Aboigbe, Trez Marshall, Jason McClellan, and Will Reichard. So why am I telling you all this? We're going to have a new-look Bama team next year. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about at least some of the names that are coming back. So it's not everybody leaving jumping ship there in Tuscaloosa. There's some good news here that came out over the weekend. We'll tell you in just a second. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we will touch on those Bama guys coming back and a big-time Bama assistant heading to Georgia. We'll touch on that in just a second. Versus episode presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Look, the NFL playoffs got underway this past weekend, and man, we had some upsets. Hopefully you got in on the action. If you hadn't yet, you need to go check out our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Their app is super easy to use. So many different bets that they've got there for you. Go check them out at FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can do so on your mobile device, on your desktop, your laptop, whatever. Get signed up, get taken care of, make your first bet a layup, and then go download the FanDuel app onto your phone. That way you can pull it up every day, check all the different bets that you want to make, and they've got it all up there for you. Live same-game parlays. They've got the parlay hub. They've got new bets in the new Explore tab. They've got it all there up there for you on the FanDuel app. Download it today. Again, sign up FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's what's going to get you the special starting offer. And then, of course, FanDuel, they are the official partner of the NFL. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day, everydayers. Come on back tomorrow on the show. We'll have our interview with Eli Drinkwitz that we haven't gotten a post show. They did it a couple days ago, but just haven't had time because we've had all this Alabama news breaking with Nick Sabin retiring and so on and so forth. So let's dive back into it as we jump into some of the latest news. In fact, let's make it official and let's go around the conference.
Out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
We stop off over at Georgia as they announced a big-time hire on Saturday morning. Alabama cornerbacks coach Travaris Robinson named Georgia's co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach. T-Rob spent 2 seasons in Tuscaloosa under Nick Sabin after a year at Miami. And Robinson will fill the role held by Will Muschamp. We'll talk about him in just a second, but Robinson served on Muschamp's staff as DB's coach from 2011 to 2014. Then he was brought on as Auburn's defensive coordinator in 2015. He's had a ton of SEC experience. You remember Ole Miss when they were playing Alabama last year, and Lane Kiffin was looking at film, and he said, I don't think Kevin Steele's running this defense. This looks like T-Rob's system. That's T-Rob, for those who haven't kept up with Travaris Robinson. But I saw a lot of Alabama fans saying, when they hired Kalen DeBoer, we like the hire, but, man, first order of business, we got to keep T-Rob. Well, Kirby Smart in Georgia, they crept in and made some moves, and they pulled T-Rob over there to Athens. So Travaris Robinson heading over to Georgia. A little bit of a loss there for Alabama. We'll see who ends up coaching the DBs at Bama under Kalen DeBoer. Now, again, I said it's not all bad news for Alabama. Some good news for Alabama. Jalen Milroe affirmed his commitment to the Alabama program on Saturday, or Friday night, rather. We know he had foregone his chance to declare for the NFL draft, but on Friday night, as some of the players are walking in to come meet Kalen DeBoer, WVUA was on hand as Milroe and his teammates arrived at the Malmore Athletic Facility, and Milroe yelled, "I'm staying, roll Tide." So we know quarterback Jalen Milroe's back. That's the biggie. Alabama also getting a piece of their offensive line. O-lineman Tyler Booker, left guard this year, all SEC performer. He confirmed Saturday night he will be coming back. He put out a message, "Playing for Coach Sabin had always been a dream of mine. I'm forever grateful for him making an impact. I look forward to carrying on the culture, the traditions, and the standards that have made Alabama, Alabama. I'm very excited to kick off this new era." So Tyler Booker and Jalen Milroe are back. That's good. Now, just a week ago, linebacker Deontay Lawson and defensive back Malachi Moore announced they were coming back. But, of course, that was prior to Sabin's retirement. So those guys decide to hit the portal, transfer elsewhere? Probably not, but, we'll wait to see what they officially say. But Deontay Lawson, Malachi Moore, both expected back. Remember also a couple weeks ago, you had offensive lineman Elijah Pritchett enter the portal, then withdraw from the portal. But again, that was before Sabin's retirement. So we'll see what happens. I expect some familiar names back for Alabama, but as you saw that list earlier, a lot of names on the move. Look, this always happens. It happens in transition. Nothing to get up in a tizzy about. Just happens whenever you have a coaching change. And for Alabama, it's just they haven't had one of these in almost 20 years. So it's just going to happen. All right, other news. Over at Georgia, they landed a commitment in the portal from former Alabama defensive back Jake Pope. He posted on social media, "Coming home, committed." Pope was originally a 4-star recruit out of Buford, Georgia. Defensive back was the number 32 safety in the class of 2022. So he is heading over to Georgia. Also, speaking of Georgia, Will Muschamp, we mentioned will have a new role heading into this season. Muschamp is moving to an off-the-field role as a defensive assistant. So he's looking to spend more time with his family. Muschamp is 52. Initially joined Kirby's staff as an analyst back in February 2021 after he got fired as head coach at South Carolina. But when Dan Lanning left to go take the Oregon job, Muschamp became co-DC along with Glenn Shumann. And that's what he's been doing the last couple of years. So Muschamp will, like we said, move into an analyst role, still be there at Georgia, but just not the co-DC. That'll be for T-Rob. So hopefully you're all caught up there. All right, other news over at Ole Miss. They have officially found a new co-defensive coordinator and secondary coach. According to a release from the school, Bryan Brown is going to leave Cincinnati to come back to Oxford to serve as the Rebels co-DC along with Pete Golding and coach the secondary. Lane Kiffin saying in a statement, "We're excited to add a high-quality coach like Bryan Brown to our staff. He has deep Ole Miss roots as a player and as a coach. He's proven himself multiple times and played at Ole Miss from 03 to 06. He's a dual-sport athlete. Also was a point guard for the Ole Miss basketball team. But Bryan Brown coming back. He'll work with Pete Golding on that defense. As for some guys coming back, John Saunders Jr. announcing he's coming back to Ole Miss for next season. Could have went pro. But last season, his first year since transferring over to Ole Miss, he had 65 tackles, 3 interceptions. Nice playmaker there. So John Saunders coming back for the Ole Miss Rebels. Also, the Rebels already got the number 1 transfer portal class. They just keep adding to it. Former Virginia Tech tight end DeQuan Wright announcing over the weekend he's transferring to Ole Miss. He'll have 2 years of eligibility remaining. Last year at Virginia Tech, he had 47 catches for 574 yards. Or rather, that was over his 2 seasons there with the team. But nonetheless, Caden Prescorn, we know, is coming back at tight end. So look for DeQuan Wright to get some action there alongside Caden Prescorn. Ole Miss also landed a pledge from South Alabama safety Yam Banks, 6'1", 208-pound defensive back. First team all-conference safety for the Jaguars back in 2022. Spent 4 years at South Alabama where he started as a corner. So it's the 15th known transfer coming to Ole Miss. It's just crazy how many pieces they're adding. They will have a loss, though. Mississippi State defensive back DeCamerion Richardson spent 4 years there at Mississippi State. He had announced a couple weeks ago he's transferring to Ole Miss. Now he is heading to the NFL draft. He said, after much thought and consideration, I've decided to enter the NFL draft. Playing 45 games over the past 4 seasons with the Bulldogs, made 24 starts. Figured the transfer to Ole Miss was going to plug right in as a starting corner for them, but now he is headed to the pros. So good luck to DeCamerion Richardson there. And there you have it. That's more of the latest tidbits going around the conference. But guess what? There's more. We've got a Steve Sarkeesian contract extension and whole lot more stuff to get to. So still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. First, I want to remind you guys, this episode presented to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. Look, I know we talk sports to escape some of the crazy realities of life, but have you been preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. It could be scary, and that's why you need to be thinking about preparing and getting yourself ready. If you got kids that are sick with a supply chain issue, keeping them from life-saving medication, things like that can happen. Thankfully, our friends at Jace Medical have the Jace case. It is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, more and more. This stuff could happen to any of you at any time. Go visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Use our offer code Locked On. That will get you $20 off your order. Again, that's jacemedical.com, JASE. All right, so we dive back into it here on Locked On SEC, on the Locked On Podcast Network. We got more stuff to get into. My goodness, there's so much news happening from over the weekend in the conference. Again, reminder, come back tomorrow. We'll have our interview with Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz. You don't want to miss that. All right, let's dive back into it as we stop off over in Austin, part of the SEC now. Steve Sarkeesian, he picked up a multi-year extension at Texas. Of course, we know Alabama maybe had been talking with him, flirting with him. We don't know for sure, but Jimmy Sexton, he's doing all this work behind the scenes, getting all of his guys paid, getting Dan Lanning paid, getting this guy paid, that guy paid, Mike Norvell paid, and now Steve Sarkeesian gets paid. He gets a 4-year extension, so he's now under contract through 2030 at Texas. Sark said in a statement, I said it when I came here 3 years ago. It's a dream job for me. It's a destination job, and I'm fired up every day to be the head coach at the University of Texas. Texas coming off their best season under Sark, going 12-2, getting to the college football playoff. Longhorns are 25-14 in his tenure there, 71-49 overall as head coach after coaching at Washington and USC previously. But obviously was the OC under Nick Saban in Alabama. There was some thought maybe the Tide was trying to pull him over there. Whether they were or whether they weren't, Sark gets a payday. So it's funny how that thing works out. So congrats to Steve Sarkeesian. He'll be at Texas, it looks like, for many years to come. All right, other news over at Kentucky. Liam Cohen left Kentucky as OC a couple years ago for the Rams, only to come back to Lexington last year. And now teams are interested once again. The Chicago Bears are planning to interview him for their vacant OC role, according to a report. Also, Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio reporting that Ohio State could be interested in him as their OC. Brian Hartline was the OC for the Buckeyes this past year, but some changes may be expected on that staff. So we'll see where Cohen ends up. Matt Jones did point out Cohen made it clear to the Kentucky staff he would not be one and done again this time around. So Cohen saw an offense that ranked 11th in the SEC in total yardage and passing yards per game, 12th in rushing yards last year, but helped develop Will Levis. Got some production out of Devin Leary last year, and obviously a transfer quarterback coming over from Georgia, we'll see, was able to do it, Brock Vandegrift. Kentucky also added a big piece to their offensive line on Friday evening, picking up former Tennessee O-lineman Gerald Mincey. Mincey entered the portal, played in all 12 games for the Vols last year, started in 6 games for Tennessee, and started his college career at Florida before he went over to the Vols. So this will be his 3rd SEC program, what was formerly the SEC. He's got to get used to not saying that anymore, but played sparingly in Gainesville before he transferred to Tennessee, was a 2-year contributor on that line for the Vols. So see what he does there for Kentucky. Got to think he comes right in and starts on that O-line. Over at LSU, they, over the weekend, were reportedly closing in on Missouri defensive line coach Kevin Peoples, who would follow defense coordinator Blake Baker down to LSU. Brian Kelly had already hired Bo Davis to be LSU's D-line coach, but multiple reports saying Kevin Peoples would coach the defensive ends at LSU while Bo Davis would coach the interior of that D-line. So see if that is made official. Kevin Peoples reportedly going down to LSU. Also some news for the Tigers over the weekend. Liberty wide receiver CJ Daniels announced he is heading to LSU. He announced it on social media. Daniels had 55 catches for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns last year at Liberty. So CJ Daniels, wide receiver, coming down to catch passes from presumably Garrett Nussmeier and the LSU Tigers. He played in the Fiesta Bowl against Oregon, had 8 catches for 79 yards that day. So LSU already making some portal movement this offseason. They added Mississippi State wide receiver Xavier Thomas, and now they add Liberty wide receiver CJ Daniels. So some decent pass catches there for LSU. Over at Texas A&M, they picked up a piece out of the portal in flipping a tight end commitment away from Washington. Trey Watson, a 3-year contributor over at Fresno State. He's 6'5", 245 pounds, coming off his best season yet. So Trey Watson, tight end, going down there to Aggie Land. It's only about our buddy Will Rogers at Mississippi State. He had committed to Washington. In fact, just last Monday, we saw him at the national championship game. Took a picture of him on the sideline. And now Will Rogers back in the transfer portal because Kalen DeBoer went down to Alabama. So we'll see where Will Rogers ends up. But 4 years at Mississippi State and basically like a month or two at Washington. Now he's on the move again. Told you guys a little bit about the Auburn news that came out on Friday. Cadillac Williams and DB coach Zach Etheridge both stepped down from their roles. So they are on the move. So Hugh Freeze going to be making some changes there on that team as far as his assistant coaches go. Matt Zenitz reporting on Friday that Houston is expected to swipe up Zach Etheridge. We'll see where Cadillac Williams ends up. Over at Georgia, DB A.J. Harris announced he is transferring to Penn State, played 1 season in Athens before hitting the portal. Over to Oklahoma, they announced that Zach Alley will be one of their co-defense coordinators and linebackers coach. He's a Clemson grad, was a student assistant, and later a grad assistant, while current Sooners coach Brett Venables was the DC there. Venables saying in a statement, "I'm excited to welcome Zach to our family. He's exceptionally hard worker and tough." Zach Alley departed Clemson in 2018, was the nickelback coach at Charlotte, became the inside linebackers coach and later outside linebackers coach at Boise. Then he was at ULM and then at Jacksonville State. So he will be one of the guys who replaces Ted Roof, who was fired following last season. Over at Florida, former Florida and Georgia defensive back Jalen Kimber announced he is transferring to Penn State instead of after being committed to Louisville. See if you can keep up with all that. Jalen Kimber, he was at Georgia, he was at Florida. Then he was going to go to Louisville, but now he's not. He's going to Penn State. If you can keep up with all of that stuff. Goodness gracious. All right, former Florida O-lineman Richie Leonard, he is transferring to rival Florida State. FSU announced him as a signee over the weekend. Leonard transfers after he led the Gators to 755 snaps on the offensive line. 12-game starter this past year. It's 1 year of eligibility remaining. So Richie Leonard from Florida to Florida State. Oof. Florida did pick up a commitment over the weekend for a new quarterback. Ex-Colorado State quarterback Clay Millen is going to transfer into Florida, give them a little bit of QB depth. So some good news there. And a quick SEC hoops nugget. A&M, they defeated Kentucky 97-92 in overtime Saturday afternoon. Really fun game to watch if you saw that one. And then Auburn, Alabama, the lone undefeated teams in conference play in the SEC so far. So fun to see when those two meet up here real soon, Alabama and Auburn. There you have it. You're caught up on all the latest news in the SEC. Look, if we missed something, there's stuff changing on a daily basis. So we'll get you caught up on all the latest stuff going on through the SEC throughout this week. Again, come on back tomorrow. We'll have some tidbits from Eli Drinkwitz coming off of his great season at Missouri and much, much more. This has been Locked On SEC. I'm Chris Gordy. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Come on back tomorrow. And for your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. It is a 24/7 streaming channel. Just search Locked On Sports Today. Hit subscribe. streaming all times, 24/7, right there for you on YouTube. So if you wake up in the middle of the night, you're looking for something, search Locked On Sports Today. They'll have something up there for you from all of our great national shows across all the sports. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Talk to you guys tomorrow.